So my name is Katie Sweetman, and this is your look at the astrology of 2024. So yes, it is that time of year again. We are looking ahead. We are wondering what is going on in the coming year. And that's the thing about astrology, is that it doesn't really understand that the calendar has flipped to a new year. Astrology has its own cycles. The astrology doesn't begin on January 1st. And so we will see in how 2024 is actually picking up on different times. However, 2024, I believe, is a bridge to the astrological events to come in 2025 and 2026. That is something that we will also talk about. And as I record this, let me go ahead and turn on the screen share. So there we go. And as I record this, this is the 20th of December, 2023. So we are right on the edge of the solstice and also the holidays. And for those that don't know who I am, my name is Katie Sweetman. I'm an astrologer. I'm also a psychic medium. So I pull upon different talents. I actually have a 20-year background in IT and graphic design. So definitely pulling from a lot of different sources. And I live in the New York City area, and I've been a professional astrologer since 2010. It's when I started empowering astrology. I wanted to talk about astrology in the way that I saw astrology, for example. So this is our agenda for today. Maybe this is mostly for those that are watching on the replay. Where have we been? We always have to look back in order to look forward. It gives us the context. Looking at the clock meaning astrology. Astrology is a clock. Where are we headed? And even the astrology of 2024, looking at it from sort of a very quick month by month view. And then, what everybody is more interested in, what does this mean for your sign, both your sun and your rising sign? So part one, where have we been? Over the last, sorry, I'm just letting some people in. Over the last, few years, and we can see the world very differently. We can debate issues very differently, but we can all hopefully agree is that a lot of things have changed in the past few years. And some of that change is not unusual, meaning astrology is just inherently about change. It's about cycles and seasons. And even as I record this, I was saying it's going to be the solstice tomorrow. And that's just one of those natural points of shift for the year. But it just seems that the change and the rate of change over the last few years has become increasingly rapid, whether that's due to the astrology or due to other energetic variables that astrology actually doesn't measure. That said, astrology is a story of intersecting arcs of time, because astrology measures time, the energy of time, how we live time, and how we live time symbolically. And so that's sometimes a little bit the maddening thing about astrology, is that you're sort of looking at all these different hands on the clock. One's a Saturn hand, one's a Pluto hand, one's a Sun hand, and how you can start to piece together a bigger story based on all these different hands in the clock. Because that's the thing, it's, when you look at a clock, you're like, oh, it's 10 past 8. But in astrology, we're halfway through Saturn and Pisces. We're on the edge of Pluto going into Aquarius. And then we've got, Mars is going to do this. So it's like looking at all these different rates of time. Oops. So it's the astrology of 2024 to that point doesn't begin in 2024. It has its roots in other times. And one of those chapters of time, I'm actually going to turn off your video. There you go, Anna. One of those chapters of times began in 2008. And I realized 2008 seems like a lifetime ago, although it wasn't that long ago that it was 2008. And that was 16 years ago, if you can believe it. And that chapter, which we'll get into, is starting to come to an end. This also in 2024 echoes 2005. Again, another a bit distant, almost 20 years ago by this point, and how there's a little bit of a thread to that time, which we will also learn about. In 2024, we continued to explore our spirituality. And maybe you're thinking, well, that's just every day for me, Katie. What are you talking about? But Saturn in 2024 is still in Pisces. And Saturn, as we are going to learn, is one of the major hands on the astrology clock. And so it's pointing to Pisces for everybody. And that in Pisces, as we will discover, Pisces is a lot of things, but one of them is that's a sign of spirituality. It's my feeling, and of course, my feelings may evolve, but as I looked at 2024, it feels to me like a bridge. And that bridge is taking us to a new era. I don't use that term lightly. I'm a pretty down-to-earth person, but as we will see when we do a little bit of a sneak peek of 2025, we have a lot of planets changing signs. And that's like looking at a clock and seeing a bunch of different hands change signs at the same time. Speaking of clocks, let's look at the clock. So for me, when I sit down every year, I look and when I look at the year ahead, I have my go-to planets. Actually, you could say that this is the case before I sit down and I work with a client. My go-to planets, the ones that are telling me what is the time in your life, if you're my client, for example. So this is a astrological wheel, and this is just sort of a quick representation of 2024, meaning where are the major planets? Now, can quickly become a much longer conversation, but astrology is faster moving planets and then slower moving planets. So, for example, the sun takes 30 days roughly to go through each of the 12 zodiac signs. It's roughly a year to make one orbit around the zodiac. But outer moving planets, Jupiter, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, and I skipped over Saturn, can't believe it, talk about these longer arcs of time. So in this little graphic that I've made, I focused on where are the planets that are the slower moving planets in 2024. So we have Pluto going into Aquarius, we have Saturn and Neptune and Pisces, we have the nodes in Aries, and then on the other side of the wheel in Pisces and Libra, and then we have Uranus and Jupiter rounding out. You may notice that most of the outer planets are bunched up on one side of the sky. It's neither good nor bad. It just sort of concentrates the focus on one area. So if astrology is about time, well, then who's the driver of time? Well, Saturn is the major driver of time. And it's like a major hand on the clock, and it's telling us the hour. Since March of 2023, Saturn has been in Pisces. I don't know if you remember this. We had a shift in 2023. Saturn left Aquarius where it was and then went to Pisces on March 7th of 2023. So that's like looking at the clock in 2023 and seeing a major hand move to a new sign, Pisces. When Saturn was in Aquarius from 2020 to 2023, the collective hour pointing us towards social issues, technology, community, connection, even disconnection. That was a little bit of the eerie things when I did my webinar on Saturn and Aquarius at the start of March of 2020. Not that, really I think anybody had much inkling of what was going on, but Saturn and Aquarius, exactly the lens in which we lived the last few years. Connection, disconnection, isolation, community, feeling like we belong, science, technology. Of course, it was very specific to certain events happening, not just collectively, but in our own personal lives. And maybe that's one of the reasons why things are a little bit different in 2023 than they were 2020 to the beginning of 2023, because Saturn has moved on. One of the things that made 2020 to 2023 a bit challenging is, in addition to Pluto, but it's another webinar for another day, is that Saturn was in a square to Uranus. Uranus is in Taurus, Saturn was in Aquarius at the time, and it really made for, astrologically speaking, this technical term, kind of a crunchy 2020 to 2023. So after Saturn, what else do I look at? I look to eclipses. They are like my go-to, my guarantee. Where are things changing and shifting throughout the year, both collectively and personally? With eclipses, times speed up, they twist, they turn, and because eclipses, they talk about this bending, or a portal is another word I don't use lightly. If you think about it, the moon is passing in front of the sun and it's blocking the sun, solar eclipse, or the earth is passing in front of the sun and blocking the light of the sun to the moon, lunar eclipse. And there's a punctuation point around those eclipses. And eclipses, as we will learn, they happen every 6 months. Usually people in. They happen every 6 months, and they really show where things are changing and where things are coming in and out of our lives throughout the year. So in 2023, our shift points were concentrated in the months of April, May, and October. I want you to go back and maybe in your own time and reflect on, okay, in 2023, what was the story in April and May? And then what was the story in October? Because these were the months where we had eclipses. We did have one eclipse in Taurus in May of 2023, but primarily we are now working with the energies of Aries and Libra. Additionally, I look to see if any slow-moving planets change signs. By and large, the answer will be no, because we have to wait 3 years typically for Saturn to change signs, although it'll be 2 years from now. And then, Uranus takes 7 years to go through a zodiac sign. Neptune takes 14 years, and Pluto can take anywhere from 11. It's a little side joke, but it's proof of a benevolent universe is that Pluto spends the least amount of time in Scorpio, 11 years. But Pluto will spend 30 years in Taurus, but that's not in our lifetime. So Jupiter changes signs every year, so that's not, that big of a deal. Jupiter takes about 12 years to go through the entirety of the zodiac. So, I look to see where's Jupiter moving towards. And then again, with Saturn and Uranus, they don't change signs very often, and then rare so for Neptune and Pluto. And then also when I'm looking to the year ahead, I'm like, what are the major aspect patterns? And maybe that's a little bit technical. An aspect pattern means, these outer planets, for example, they're slow moving. They will hold, in the case of Saturn and Uranus, 2020 to 2023, they will hold a 90-degree angle. And so I will look to the year, like who else is making a similar type of aspect? It doesn't have to be a square, it can be an opposition, it can be a conjunction, for example. And then lastly, are there any major retrogrades? So I sort of see, okay, what's going on in the retrograde department? I might say this, yes, and all planets turn retrograde, so that's not a big deal, but some planets, they don't turn retrograde as much. So that would be Venus and Mars, but in this case, I really do look at Saturn turning retrograde and direct. That's common, but Saturn, as we will discover, really sets the time for the year. And then I've noticed that Uranus, it turning retrograde and direct, can also be a time when things shake up. And then if Venus or Mars turns retrograde. In 2023, we were wrapping up Mars retrograde, which felt like the longest 7 months of my life. And then Venus was retrograde from July to September in 2023. These major points start to reveal a picture of the year ahead and even beyond. So maybe a story is beginning in 2024 that takes us way beyond 2024. For example,